So how do we make use of this? Well, I've developed out of this, I developed a 4-stage process that begins with a thematic statement, which I'll get into in a second. You begin with a thematic statement for the whole book. Then you do a chapter outline, generally based on what comes next, generally based on the hero's journey, generally based on business process, and you write a similar thematic statement for each of those chapters. And just as I told you the Star Wars story, and there's much more to the Star Wars story than those 12 sentences, but in broad strokes, I told you Star Wars in 12 sentences. You should be able to see at that point your whole book in 7, 9, depending on how many chapters, 7 or 9 distinctive thematic statements. That's the progression of the unfolding of your idea. From there, you outline each chapter into 3 acts, which is Hollywood language for premise, complications, transformation. So in Hollywood, they have Act 1, which is the premise. The vast middle of the movie is Act 2, and then Act 3 is that decision to go back, to take the road back. Even though you've got the reward, it's not enough. How many times have we seen movies where it seems like they've grabbed the thing that they were going for, and then they say, no, I've got to go back and get Billy, right? That's what that is. That's the road back when you don't have to, but you know you must, and that's what makes the protagonist in that moment the hero. So, and then finally, you're able to distribute all your notes, all your different, all the pieces that you have. I'll get into that in a second, because I'm getting ahead of myself. Now, I'm not saying this is the only way to write a book, and I want to add that right now. I mean, if you're writing a book, or if you've written books and you're happy with it, I'm saying this is the only way I know how to write a book fast. And I know that for a lot of people, getting to the market faster so that you can get out there, so that you have a book in hand to share with your clients and with potential clients is important. And if there's no reason, if you can't really manage or attempt to assemble your book and think that you can intuit it and work it out on your own, I promise you, the world's most highest paid storytellers do not sit around and say, what kind of movie do we want to make? They use these benchmarks. They use these to feed their imagination, to form their thoughts, and again, to respond to the customer's expectations. So let's discuss the thematic statement. Anybody familiar with Robert McKee? He's the author of the book Story. Okay, he made a brief appearance, an actor playing him made a brief appearance in the movie Adaptation. When that screenwriter was desperate, he met Robert McKee in a bar, and he gave him some advice on how to write. Well, Robert McKee has this wonderful concept for a thematic statement, which is always a statement of value plus cause. And the word because has to be in every thematic statement because the causality is what drives the narrative. So the thematic statement for Good to Great is good companies succeed in transforming themselves into great companies because, and then what do? They practice certain traits of leadership, strategy, and culture that merely good companies do not. Now, you can probably come up with better ones that say, well, better versions of this. But the point is that there has to be a value, there has to be causality, and there has to be action. The way McKee puts it, and I think this is really memorable, is thematic statement defines the how and why of change. And if you're not writing about change, why are you writing a book, right? Every book is about change. You're doing it this way, you ought to do it this way. How and why of change. This is the largest how and why of change, the all-encompassing how and why of change in Good to Great. From there, here's the table of contents for Good to Great. So from there, you then figure out your chapter titles, and I know that that's not an easy process. You have to figure out using the tools of the hero's journey and business process, figure out what part of your message fits where. So, chapter 1 is the introduction. The chapter theme of the introduction is identical to the book theme. The introduction is you're introducing the reader to your theme. So Level 5 leadership. Level 5 leaders succeed in making their companies great because they combine extreme personal humility with intense professional will. First who, then what? That's chapter 3. Level 5 leaders succeed strategically because they hire the right people first before formulating those strategies. Great companies succeed because they confront the brutal facts about their current realities and act on their implications. Now, here's a reality check. Every single one of these chapter themes are somewhat counterintuitive. If it's an obvious statement, it's not a chapter theme, you might not have a chapter. That's how I feel. That's how I feel. If I can't write something that is interesting, when I say that, when Collins says level 5 leaders succeed in making their companies great because they combine extreme personal humility with intense professional will, if the reader doesn't feel some skepticism about that, then you're not saying anything. And that's where I challenge myself to do better. I work with the author, work with my author to do better. Is there anything we can say? What is in your materials points to something stronger for chapter 2, for chapter 3, and so on. So without getting into all these, interesting here, great companies sustain good to great transformation because their cultures create a flywheel-like pattern of buildup and breakthrough. So you see that as we get to the end, chapter 8, around the time of resurrection, what's the word there? The doom loop, death. Collins is encountering death exactly where in the hero's journey we're talking about death and resurrection. And then, of course, the final chapter is about business transformation, the magic elixir. Great companies sustain enduring greatness, basically achieve immortality, because they preserve their core values and purpose while endlessly adapting strategies and practices to a changing world.
Noel, I have a question. Do each chapters, should they be standalone, or there should be a logical hook into the next one?
That's the thing. If you go with the structure, if you follow the hero's journey, they will flow into each other, and in ways that are surprising and exciting. And having written novels, this is what happens when your characters surprise you, when you can't believe that the character did this thing, but they were just, it's got to happen. That's because they're being pulled along. So
could they stand alone? Could they be a standalone chapter?
In fact, again, I feel like you've been looking at my notes. One of the
I'm accused of that often.
The other criteria. Okay, so it's got to be interesting, but here's the other criteria that I use for chapters, and you actually reminded me. Could you write a pretty good book about this subject? Could this chapter sustain a pretty good book? So that when somebody reads your table of contents, instead of seeing 7 pieces of one good idea, they actually see 7 really interesting ideas. Now, again, if you follow the hero's journey, each stage of the hero's journey is deep enough and rich enough to sustain a lot. So let's look. Level 5 leadership. Level 5 leaders succeed in making their companies great because I think that there have been books about that. Just that one chapter. There have been books on the subject of how to be a great leader. Chapter 2, hire first before formulating strategies. How to hire. There's a whole book about that. 3, confronting the brutal facts. I can see a book called Confront the Brutal Facts. So the benefit of that is that you could probably write a pretty thin 60,000 words on those subjects. However, if you can write a thin 60,000 words, then you have no doubt that you can do a killer 7,000 words. Absolutely. So you're going to kill that subject in 7,000 words. In fact, you're going to be sad how much you have to throw out, because that's usually what happens. So here's good to great. Good is the enemy of great is chapter 1, which is Collins's introduction. Again, ordinary world, call to adventure, and why the good companies can't be great. Why good is the enemy of great. Why they refuse. Meeting the mentor, objective setting. Level 5 leadership, it's right there. The leader is the mentor. First threshold, strategy development. And there, the first threshold is do not start your strategy with the people you got. Hire the right people before you begin the journey into the new world, crossing the threshold. Tests, allies, enemies, tactical planning, confront the brutal facts. Plenty of tactics involved there. And again, Approach the inmost sanctum, the ordeal, execution management. Hedgehog concept is probably the most fascinating chapter in the whole book because it talks about 3 management imperatives that good companies fail at all the time and great companies, in Collins's mind, succeed. Focus on what drives profits, do what you can be best at in the world, and do what ignites passion. And the reward is a culture of discipline. And that's right there in the book, that if you do all these things, your reward is a culture of discipline that propels you forward. But it's not enough. The road forward is using technology to accelerate this progress. And the resurrection is the flywheel and the doom loop. You either follow the flywheel and your company is transformed, or you take the loop of death and your company is destroyed. And that's the choice. And the magical elixir is, again, chapter 9, from good to great to built to last. And that's the magic secret of the thing that will save your company forever, according to Collins.